Amen. You may be seated.
I do have praise.
Okay.
When all of this was going on, with them signing the peace thing and all of that, Whitey and I were watching it, and the whole time I just felt like the Lord was saying, you need to explain to him what is really happening. And so I got to talk to him quite a bit about what the Bible has to say about a lot of this stuff, that is happening. And he seemed to really be listening. He didn't
Good.
ignore any of that. He was really listening. So
Praise the Lord.
I feel like that was a good opportunity, that the Lord used that to tell him.
Yeah. So, yeah. Keep praying for Whitey. We should have him, on the prayer list every week. Or maybe we can make up a separate prayer list for the long-term prayers, and then, yeah. Like we're always going to have Brother Roger on there. We're always going to have, Brother Bill on there. Well, Brother Jim. And Brother Whitey, as he, whether he knows it or not, as he thinks about the Lord. All right. Book of Matthew, chapter 6. Now we're going to go back to verse 19 and read forward. We went through verse 21. So we'll read chapter 6, verses 19 through 21, and then start our lesson tonight in verse 22. And I'll show you why when we get there. We're just going to read. So, verse 19. Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. For where, and this is the important part, for where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. So remember, we talked about we need to keep focused. So then in verse 22, he said, the light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, and that word means simple. In other words, not anything going on with it other than being an eye. So, the light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. Or in other words, your eye can allow all that light to come in. So it's not disease, it's not, have any other problem. So the one thing that we have to understand in verse 22, Jesus does not change subjects. What was he just talking about? The treasure. Don't lay up yourselves treasures on the earth, lay up yourself treasures in heaven, because where your heart is, or where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So he's not changing the subject. And we have to look at this and understand that it's a very intriguing verse, to be sure, because you wonder, what's that got to do with anything? I mean, we've never had to ask that question before, right? Where did that come from? Anyway, it's a very intriguing verse. Jesus is still looking at the reaction, excuse me, that we have towards our wealth, whether it be a lot or whether it be a little. What are you doing with your investments? Where are your investments? How many of you panic when the stock market goes down? I don't either. I figured, well, you know, the Lord's still in control. Now, I have a retirement account through the Central Valley School District, and every month they put in 5%, they match 5% of whatever, you know, my salary was or is at that time. And I could put 5% in, but I chose to put 7% in. And that little 2%, you know, made a difference. However, since then, the market has gone up, the market has gone down. The market has gone up, the market has gone down. And where was Brother Al? Well, not flatlining, just staying steady. Yeah, I never even thought about it. And since then, the amount that, you know, by the time I became eligible for that, I had about another 14, 15 years that I was eligible for that benefit. And in that time, all that money stayed in there. I didn't worry about it, didn't even think about it. I didn't worry about what the stock market was doing. And I'm still not worried about it. But now, and it wasn't a whole lot, but it was, you know, something. Yeah. And now I have more than doubled what the amount was when I retired. Do you have the sharing, retirement sharing? Yeah. Don't touch it. I know some of the drivers that we had at the Central Valley District, every time, everything was a panic to them. And so something would happen, you know, their dog would get a, you know, sore toe or something, and they had to take, you know, a couple $1,000s out of their retirement or out of their IRA or whatever. And some people just don't get it. If you're going to have something like that, save it for retirement. Well, I'm retired, and it's still being saved. Someday I'll give it to somebody else, like my wife or the kids. But I don't panic. I didn't panic. I haven't. I won't. So it's a very intriguing verse, and Jesus is still looking at the reaction that we have towards our wealth, using our bodies, in particular, the eye. So he's used our bodies for other things, you know, other examples and illustrations, but here he's using the eye. And he states that the light or the lamp of the body is the eye. And if the eye is single or simple, if it's not giving you any problems type thing, the entire body will be full of light. So think that one through. If your eye is focused, and I believe that's what he is getting at, we need to have our focus where it belongs. If our eye is focused where it should be focused, we will see clearly so as to flood our body with light. Or in other words, we'll be looking to see what the Lord wants us to do. Right? Remember, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And now he wants us to focus our eye on what we should be doing. But he's not quite finished with that yet. In verse 23, Jesus gives us the flip side. But if thine eye be evil, thy whole body shall be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in thee be darkness, how great is that darkness? And that wasn't a question, that was a statement. So Jesus pounds a very important point home, and that is, if our eye be evil, or in other words, if our eyes are diseased or blinded, whatever the case may be, that would be included in that evil. It says our entire body will be full of darkness, but not just a dim light, but great. And that word great means deep and void of any light. In other words, it'd be like you are blinded. But to what will you be blinded? We'll be blinded as to what we should be focusing on. Yeah. But see, our treasure is where Jesus is, because he is our treasure. So anyway, does this mean that his disciples were lost? No. So how could they be full of darkness? Well, you can be spiritually blinded and a child of God. Or you can be a child of God and be spiritually blinded. However you want to look at that. Being spiritually void of understanding of light does not equal no salvation. Salvation does not equal being fully understanding and fully focused where we should be. Does it? Since you've all been saved many, many moons ago, you've never done anything wrong, correct? Yeah. Well, yeah, that's like one of my favorite illustrations. Guy was talking to the Lord, and he said, Lord, so far today, I haven't gotten mad at anybody unnecessarily. He said, I haven't done anything wrong. I haven't had any bad thoughts. But I do know, Lord, that pretty quickly I have to get out of this bed, and then I need your help. Yeah. So we can have that darkness. He's talking to his disciples. He's teaching his disciples. He's not teaching the multitudes. Now, when I asked the question, does this mean his disciples were lost? No. What it does mean is that they would be sorely lacking spiritual understanding if they weren't keeping their focus correct. Even God's people can embrace darkness instead of light, and it might have to do with chasing after what? What's he been talking about? Money. Yeah. I mean, people do, even God's people do weird things because of money. And that's why Paul, when he wrote to Timothy, he said, the root of all evil is what? The love of money. And he's talking about God's children, church members even. So we can do that. That's why I think it's so important that we understand that Jesus is teaching here, keep your focus where it belongs. But in verse 24, we see that he goes on. He says, no man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. And we all know that, right? We know that saying, at least that part of it. It appears that there is no middle ground on this issue according to Jesus. And that's remembering where your focus should be and also where your treasure is. No one can divide his loyalties between two masters, we'll say, or bosses, because he will continue dividing those loyalties and eventually choose one over another. And then he will be in trouble if he chooses the wrong master to follow. Jesus gets rather specific when he names both masters, God and Mammon. No man can serve, you can't serve God and Mammon at the same time. The word Mammon, fun word, comes from the Chaldean language, think Babylon, and it translates as one whom one trusts. One whom one trusts. Who do you trust? Or your money? Yeah. And there are so many people who put so much stock in money that they're almost unbearable to be around. Even if they say they're going to give you some, don't believe them. Now, hence, what do you want? Do you want to trust God, or do you want to trust your wealth or riches? So therein lies the danger and the risk. We will begin to trust in one more than the other until the other is ignored and disregarded. We can be in trouble if the one we disregard is God. And I know people who have done that. People who were good church members for years. And then something happens, they get an inheritance or whatever, and all of a sudden, they go out and buy a boat and or whatever, RV, and then you never see them again. Happens a lot, unfortunately. All right. Now let me ask you another question. Do you have a habit of worrying, being full of anxiety over different things? Sometimes. I think sometimes we all have things we worry about or we're anxious about. Well, look at verse 25. Because Jesus is going to now change subjects, but he's going to address this. Therefore I say unto you, take no thought for your life, what you shall eat, or what you shall drink, or yet for your body, what you shall put on. Is not the life more than meat or food, and the body than raiment? Anybody here ever felt like God was going to leave them so destitute they were going to have to go to work naked? No, not me. Well, Jesus said, don't worry about what you're going to eat, what you're going to drink, or what you're going to wear. Didn't he? Yes, he did. But there's a good reason for that. I will start this section by stating that I believe Jesus is telling his disciples to not give into worry or anxiousness, as in being overly concerned by what they would eat or what they would wear, while they were indeed following God and his word. And see, that's the caveat in all of this. I've known people who were just so worried about everything that was going on in their life, and they didn't know what was going to happen tomorrow or the next day even, or, I don't remember what happened yesterday, and that bothers me. Well, that tells me something. They're not trusting in the Lord. Well, you can't oversimplify. Yes, I can. Because that's exactly what Jesus was saying. So again, I say all of that because he, Jesus, has been teaching them the importance of obeying the Lord's teaching and the Lord's leadership and how they were going to conduct their lives while not being distracted from God's work. And if we're going to be distracted by, what are we going to eat tomorrow? We're not doing what the Lord wants us to do, is it? Are we? Think about the last statement of verse 25, which Jesus gives in the form of a question. Your life is indeed more valuable and should be treasured more than what's for dinner. It may not be what you want, but if it nourishes you, be thankful. Because your life for God is infinitely more valuable, and your body is more valuable in God's service, than how you adorn it. So God would have you take care of your body so as to be strong and vibrant. Does he want us healthy? Yeah. Now, it doesn't mean that we still live in fallen bodies, and none of us are ever going to be free from different things happening. Burst appendix. It didn't burst, yeah, but it could have, but cancer, yeah. Bad eyesight, heart condition, diabetes. I think I'll do an infomercial. So, let's go to verse 26. There, Jesus expands what he just wrote or said in verse 25. Behold, the fowls of the air, for they sow not, neither do they reap, nor gather into barns, yet your heavenly Father feedeth them. Are you not much better than they? Think it through. When is the last time you saw birds out in the fields and plowing and planting with tools or harvesting equipment so that they could eat and feed their families? We have a flock of geese, a gaggle of geese, that like to go through this field over here and pick out, the grain that has fallen down, whatever. And they're picking that field clean. And they move from side to side. But we don't see them out there hoeing or raking. Do we? Nope. We don't see them out there with little tractors so they can put all their stuff in the barn and eat it later. Nope. What do we see? We see God taking care of his creation. Now, he's given us the wherewithal to do our planting and harvesting and so on and so forth. But we see the birds eating and feeding their babies because God has provided for them in his natural world. Some birds drink nectar. Some eat insects. Some eat seeds or grains. Some are carnivores. Your magpies, your crows, your vultures, God's cleanup crew. So, but all are provided for. Brother Dean, would you look up Revelation 19, verses 17 through 19? And read that for us.
Verse 17?
Chapter 19, verse 19.
Well, 19, 19.
Or 19, 17 through 19.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, okay.
And I saw an angel standing in the sun, and he cried with a loud voice, and to all the fowls that fly in
So God he has his cleanup crew out there. It's what we call nature, but this is literally at the end of the earth, going into the millennial reign. Or no, this is at the end of the millennial reign, yeah. Yeah, well, either way, yeah. So here you have something like the birds and you think, oh, what a pretty bird, oh, you know. But they're taken care of. God has given them instinct so that they know what to do. If they're a hummingbird, they know they have to go find the nectar out of the plants that produce the nectar. If they're robins and one of their main, we'll just say, one of their main delicacies is a worm, they go out looking for the worms. By the way, you ever watch a robin in the spring? And a robin is sitting there going like this, and everybody thinks that they're looking down there for a worm. They're listening. The worm under the surface of the soil makes a noise that the robins can pick up on, and so they know where the worm is, and all of a sudden, and they go feed their babies after they eat. There are other birds that catch the moths in your backyard. They eat other insects. There are some birds that eat, again, seeds. God takes care of feeding any of his creation. Squirrels eat nuts, and they bury them, and then they go pick up, dig them back up during the wintertime so they can eat.
Name this some of trees grow.
Yeah.
There's your squirrel doing the work, see, planting the seed.
Yep.
You got a little shovel and axe, wheelbarrow.
Yeah. So, you ever go to your flower garden and you watch the honeybees come into the flower patch and they look at the different flowers as a bloom opens up. You know those dahlias that you ladies got for Mother's Day? Well, we have one that's, the plant's about this big around and about that tall, and it just has like 40 to 50 blossoms on it all the time, and it's got more buds. The bees come into there, and they look, and right in the center, they have this little area that opens up, but it doesn't open up until the rest of the flower is opened up, and it opens up, and you can see the pollen inside that little area. The bees will come, they'll see that it's not open yet, they go to another one. They come, they see somebody else has gotten to that one, and so they don't have any pollen to get. They go to another one until they find it. They get in there and they pull the pollen onto their body, their front legs, and they have these two little pouches on their hind legs. And they scrape the pollen off their front legs into the pouches, and you see the pouches filling up with this yellow pollen. When it's full, when both of them are full, back to the hive, unload. Workers inside the hive will turn it into bee bread or honey along with enzymes from their bodies, and then they back. And by the way, the honeybees, if you stand there and watch them, you can even pick a few of the flowers. You know, the blooms will get old, and you got to make room for the new ones to bloom. But the honeybees won't bother you. They just move on, and they still stay right there. You're watering, they stay right there. Honey, no. They have not been able to prove that 3,000-year-old honey is bad, because it's not. Yeah, but we're talking raw honey along with the enzymes that the bees put in it, not the processed stuff that you buy in a store. But how much more important are you to God than birds? Is a question that Jesus asked his disciples. Look at that. Excuse me. He said, are you not much better than they? Speaking about the birds. And we'll go through verse 27 real quick. And we'll stop there for tonight. But verse 27 gives another reason to quit worrying. If we worry, we're not trusting, according to what Jesus was teaching us here. If we are full of anxiety, we're not trusting. Isn't that what Paul wrote to the church at Philippi? Be careful for nothing. And that word careful means be anxious for nothing. But in everything, give it over to God. So, verse 27, which of you, by taking thought, can add 1 cubit unto his stature? Short people, especially men, don't like being short. Now, women, that's okay. I mean, they don't, sometimes you hear women don't like to be short, but some are fine with it.
I'm getting shorter all the time.
Yeah. But look at Zacchaeus. He couldn't see over anybody, not even the women. So he had to climb up into a sycamore tree to see Jesus.
And he couldn't have had an Napoleon complex.
No, he had the wee little man complex. Yeah. Even made a song about him. The kids thought it was great. But if they ever when they grow up, they'll understand, that was really kind of rude. So, which of you, by taking thought, can add 1 cubit unto his stature? If someone is short, by the way, how is short measured? Taller. Yeah. So, most of us in here are pretty average in height, right? But if somebody who is 7'2" walks through that door without bumping their head, we would all be short. Or if somebody who is 3'6" walked through that door, we would all be tall. So how short is short? How is short measured? Well, it depends on your...
Well, this one's 1 cubit short.
Yeah, 1 cubit short, yeah. And they agonize, the short people, most of the time. Like I said, that's mostly a men thing. They agonize before they begin to grow taller. They think if they agonize enough, if they worry enough, they'll grow. If they hold their breath and pump their arms, maybe they'll start growing. I don't know. But they try all these different things, and it doesn't work. So Jesus was saying, how many of you, by taking thought, can add 1 cubit unto his stature? This actually teaches a completely different lesson, and that lesson is we need to not worry about anything we can't control. What is your lot in life? You ever hear people walking around? Oh, it's just my lot in life. Well, if that's what the Lord gave you, go for it. See where he's going to take you with it. So, we don't need to worry about anything that we can't control. And if God doesn't see fit to change our circumstance, it won't change. And all these people will say, all you got to do is have positive thoughts. Well, the only thing that'll get you is a headache. Trust the Lord. This whole section is about trusting what the Lord wants to do with you and me. All right, we'll stop there tonight. Questions?
I have one. So in the verse 25, the therefore,
Uh-huh.
so rich, poor, mammon, I mean, there's still, everything we read after 25, there's still some connection to that.
Well, there is, but the connection isn't
Not worrying about, well, they were worried about mammon or God,
right.
but let's not worry about that. It's kind of where therefore took us.
Well, in that sense, therefore, you don't have to worry about a thing. If God can take care of your food and your hydration, water, milk, whatever, and your clothing, it doesn't have to be the finest. It doesn't have to be, designer clothing. It doesn't have to be, eating the finest and richest food every day. No, in fact, that might be detrimental. And be worried about what God wants you to do. And remember where your focus is to be. Therefore. All right, let's stand. And Brother Dean, would you dismiss us, please?